January 1945, Holtzwihr Forest, France. A burning tank, a 19-year-old officer standing on top of it, 6 German tanks and 250 infantry closing in. He is alone. His men have already pulled back. The metal beneath his boots is hot enough to blister skin, and inside that hull sit live artillery shells that could detonate at any second. He climbs anyway. His name was Audie Murphy, 5'5", 110 pounds, a face so young that recruiters laughed when he first tried to enlist. The Marines rejected him. The paratroopers rejected him. The army almost sent him to the cookhouse. And yet, on this single afternoon, that rejected boy would single-handedly break the back of a German counterattack, kill or wound roughly 50 enemy soldiers, and walk away as the most decorated American soldier of the Second World War. How does a 110-pound kid from a Texas cotton field end up standing on a burning tank, daring an entire army to come closer? That question is the entire story. Picture the scene first. Deep snow, pine trees splintered by shell fire. A company of American infantry, Company B, reduced from 128 men to 19 still able to fight. 6 tanks rolling out of the tree line like grey steel walls. Infantry pouring out behind them in numbers the Americans cannot match. Murphy does the math in seconds. 18 men cannot hold this line. He orders them back. He stays. Next to him sits a wrecked M10 tank destroyer, already hit once, already on fire, already a coffin waiting to finish burning. On its turret sits a .50 caliber machine gun. Everyone else sees a death trap. Murphy sees the only weapon left. He climbs onto the burning tank. He has not fired the gun yet, and the Germans have not yet seen him standing there. In a few seconds, that will change. In a few seconds, an entire counterattack will turn its attention toward one teenager standing on top of a bomb. The system: a German assault built to overrun a broken company. The weakness: nobody expected one man to stand his ground on top of explosives. The body: 110 pounds of cotton field muscle and nerve, about to hold a forest by himself. The tank was designed to burn. The boy decided to stand on it anyway. That decision is where this story really begins. But to understand why he didn't run, you have to go back further. Back to a dirt farm in Texas, a father who vanished, and a boy who learned to kill before he learned algebra. To understand the boy on the burning tank, you have to understand the system that built him first. And it wasn't the army. It was poverty. Audie Murphy was born in 1925 in Kingston, Texas, the 6th of 12 children in a family of sharecroppers. Sharecropping was its own kind of machine. A farmer worked land he didn't own for a landlord who took most of the harvest, leaving barely enough to survive the winter. His father drifted in and out, then left for good. His mother died when Audie was a teenager. By age 12, he had already dropped out of school. 5th grade was as far as he got. To work the cotton fields and hunt small game so his younger siblings would eat. A rifle wasn't a hobby in that house. It was a grocery bill. Every missed shot meant a hungry night for someone smaller than him. That is where the marksmanship came from. Not a shooting range, a kitchen table with not enough food on it. This was not just a childhood. It was a layered system of scarcity, and Murphy learned to beat it, one bullet at a time. December 1941, Pearl Harbor. Murphy is 16, lies about his age, and tries to enlist. The Marines take one look at him, 5'5", barely 100 pounds, and turn him away. The paratroopers do the same. Finally, the regular army takes him, reluctantly, mostly because they need warm bodies more than ideal ones. At boot camp, a commander looks at his frame and tries to reassign him to the kitchen, certain he can't carry a full combat pack across rough terrain. Murphy refuses the transfer outright. He goes to North Africa, then Sicily, then mainland Italy, then southern France. Campaigns soaked in some of the worst infantry fighting of the entire war. And in each one, the system meant to filter out men like him instead watches him climb past it. Private, corporal, sergeant. Then, almost unheard of for an enlisted man, battlefield commission straight to second lieutenant, earned purely through combat results, not connections, not schooling. The Army had a system for ranking men. Murphy broke it, from the bottom up. By January 1945, he commands a platoon, then briefly a company, in the freezing forests near the Alsace region. The Germans are mounting a desperate counteroffensive to push American forces back. Murphy's unit takes the brunt of it, fight after fight, until Company B is gutted down to 19 riflemen. Every system that should have stopped him, recruiters, drill instructors, the odds of infantry combat itself, missed something. They saw a small, sickly-looking teenager. They never accounted for what scarcity had already taught him, that giving up meant somebody else starved, somebody else died, and that was simply not an option. The system was enormous, but every system has a seam. And on January 26, 1945, that seam would open directly onto a burning tank in the snow. The snow at Holtzwihr is knee-deep, and the temperature is well below freezing. Murphy's boots are already soaked through from days of fighting before this moment even begins. He watches the tree line. 6 German tanks emerge first, engines growling, tracks crushing fresh snow. Behind them, roughly 250 infantry move in formation, rifles up, confident. They have numbers. They have armor. They believe this position is already theirs. Murphy has 19 men. He does the math and orders 18 of them back toward the woods, out of the direct line of the assault. He stays at the forward position alone, with a field telephone, calling in artillery coordinates onto the advancing line. For a while, this works. Shells land, the advance slows. Infantry scatters and regroups. But artillery support has limits, and the Germans keep coming. The phone line is Murphy's only connection to anything resembling support, and even that is a thin, fragile thread compared to 6 tanks closing the distance. Then the M10 tank destroyer near him takes a direct hit. Flame spreads across its hull. Smoke pours from the engine compartment. Inside the wreck sits unused ammunition, shells that could cook off from the heat at any moment. Every soldier nearby understands what that tank has become, a bomb with a timer nobody can see. Murphy looks at it anyway. The .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret is still intact, still loaded, still usable, if someone is willing to stand exactly where the heat is worst, and the explosion, if it comes, will be closest. Breathing stops. He climbs. The metal underfoot is already hot enough to feel through his boot soles. Smoke stings his eyes. Bullets are starting to crack past him as German infantry notice movement on top of the wreck. He grips the gun, swings it toward the advancing line, and opens fire. The sound is enormous, far louder than anything a single rifleman could produce. For the German soldiers advancing across open snow, the effect is immediate. Men in the front ranks drop. The advance stutters. 110 pounds of teenager alone on a burning vehicle becomes the loudest thing on that battlefield. He keeps the phone line open the entire time, relaying targets to the artillery battery behind him, walking shells closer and closer to his own position to keep pace with the German advance. At one point, the officer on the other end asks how close the enemy actually is. Murphy's answer becomes one of the most repeated lines of the entire war. Hold the phone, and he'll let them talk to one of the bastards himself in a minute. Then a round catches his right leg. Blood fills his boot. The cold should be numbing it, but adrenaline burns hotter than the pain, at least for now. He does not climb down. The tank beneath him groans. Metal stressed by fire and impact does not stay stable forever. And everyone watching, German and American alike, knows that wreck is going to give out eventually. The only question is whether Murphy will still be standing on it when it does. The tank was a bomb with no clock. He fired anyway. Minutes stretch into an hour. The machine gun barrel is glowing from sustained fire. German infantry, unable to advance past the open ground he controls, begin pulling back into the tree line. The tanks, stripped of infantry support, have nowhere productive to push. Then the gun runs dry. Silence for a moment, except the crackling of the burning hull beneath his boots. How does a wounded teenager climb down off a vehicle that's about to explode, with a bullet in his leg, and still have anything left to give? Murphy climbs down from the wreck on a leg that barely holds weight. The tank, stripped of his presence, sits smoking behind him. And within minutes, it finally gives out, consumed entirely by the fire that had been threatening to swallow it the whole time he stood on it. He had timed his exit by instinct, not by any gauge or warning system. There was no system. There was only a feeling that the moment had run out. Medics nearby offer him a stretcher. He refuses it. Blood is still filling his boot. His leg barely functions, and by any normal measure, he should be carried off this field. Instead, he limps back toward the tree line, where his 18 remaining men are dug in, regrouping. The system, in this case basic medical protocol for a wounded officer, assumed he would stop. He didn't. Murphy reorganizes what's left of his command on the move. 18 tired, half-frozen riflemen, watching their lieutenant walk back into position despite a leg wound, decide the fight isn't over either. He leads them forward in a counterattack that pushes the remaining German forces out of the area entirely. 1 hour earlier, the German command believed this position would fall in minutes. 6 tanks, 250 infantry, against 19 exhausted Americans and 1 wounded officer standing on a burning wreck. Filed, reinforced, authorized. That was the plan on paper, a textbook breakthrough backed by armor, numbers, and momentum. Paper assumed rational defenders would retreat once the math turned against them. Murphy never read that assumption as a rule. He read it as something he could simply refuse to follow. By the time American reinforcements arrive to relieve the position, the line is intact. No ground was lost. The encirclement that should have happened, given the numbers involved, simply never materializes. Because one man on a burning tank consumed an hour the Germans could not afford to lose. The system was tightening, but the breach had already begun. For his actions that day, Murphy is later recommended for the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration. The recommendation goes up the chain with witness statements from the men he sent to safety, men who watched from the tree line as their lieutenant stood alone against an army. But medals are written in careful, bloodless language. Citations describe sustained fire, enemy casualties, tactical outcomes. They rarely describe what it costs a 110-pound 19-year-old to stand on top of something built to kill him and not move for an hour. That gap between what the record says and what the body actually went through is where the next part of this story lives. How do you write down, in official language, what it feels like to choose a burning tank over running? Military citations are written to be precise, not emotional. The official language describing Holtzwihr reads almost flat. Enemy casualties estimated, position held, artillery directed accurately under fire. Numbers, outcomes, nothing about what it sounds like when a .50 caliber gun glows red from sustained firing, or what burning metal smells like through a soldier's boots. When the recommendation for the Medal of Honor moved up the chain, it required something citations rarely get: corroboration from multiple eyewitnesses who watched the entire hour unfold. The men Murphy had ordered to the rear became, unintentionally, his historians. They were the ones who could describe what the paperwork alone couldn't. Some officers reviewing the account reportedly found it almost difficult to believe. Not because they doubted Murphy, but because the scale of it. One man against 6 tanks and 250 infantry sounded more like exaggeration than a battlefield report. It took repeated witness statements to convince the review boards that no detail had been inflated. What stayed with me was this. The records confirmed the event almost reluctantly. The history was true, but it was almost too large for the paperwork meant to contain it. Murphy received the Medal of Honor, along with every other major combat decoration the United States had to offer at the time. An unmatched collection for a single soldier. Newspapers eagerly turned him into a symbol. The smallest man, the biggest hero, the perfect headline. But headlines don't carry weight home. The body does. After the war, Murphy struggled for years with what would now be diagnosed as severe post-traumatic stress disorder, though in the 1940s there was barely a vocabulary for it. He suffered insomnia, nightmares, and what people around him described as a man who never fully left that frozen forest. He reportedly slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow for years afterward, unable to fully trust that the threat was over. The system recorded a victory. The body kept paying for it long after the citation was signed. History recorded the escape from disaster at Holtzwihr in a few paragraphs of official text. But the man who made it happen carried the weight of that hour for the rest of his life. Through failed sleep, through fame he never fully wanted, through a public image of fearlessness that hid a private war he never fully won. What does it mean when a man survives the system built to kill him, only to keep fighting it quietly for decades afterward? The forest at Holtzwihr still exists today, though it has long since grown back over what was once a frozen battlefield. The exact spot where the M10 burned has no marker most visitors would notice, just trees, undergrowth, the quiet of rural eastern France. What remains isn't concrete or steel. It's paperwork in military archives, a handful of photographs, and the citation that still describes, in careful bureaucratic language, 50-some enemy casualties and a position held against impossible odds. The tank itself is gone, consumed by its own fire within minutes of Murphy climbing down. No wreckage to point to, no preserved hull in a museum. The most physical evidence of that hour exists only in memory and in the words of men who are themselves long gone now. Murphy went home to a country eager to celebrate him. Hollywood came calling, and he spent years acting in films, including one where he played himself in a dramatization of his own war record. He became briefly one of the most famous men in America. But fame didn't fix what the war had done. He gambled, struggled financially despite his success, and continued battling the insomnia and flashbacks that never fully left him. Friends described a man who flinched at sudden loud noises decades after the guns had gone quiet. The system, in this case an entire nation's appetite for heroes, wanted a clean story. Small kid, big medals, happy ending. The truth was messier. Murphy spent much of his later life trying to be honest about what the war had cost, speaking publicly about combat trauma at a time when most veterans were expected to simply stay silent about it. He often deflected the praise aimed at him directly. He said, more than once, that the real heroes of the war were the men who never made it home to hear any of it. A 110-pound kid who was rejected by 2 branches of the military went on to become the most decorated American soldier of the entire war. He stood on a bomb and dared it to go off before he was finished with it. The tank was built to burn. He decided to stand on it anyway. Audie Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971 at just 45 years old. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery in a section visited more than almost any other grave there besides the Kennedys. He survived an army. He never fully escaped the war it left behind. That, more than any medal, is the real measure of what Holtzwihr cost, and what it means to call someone the bravest man who ever wore the uniform.